The diplomatic research vessel Eternal Dawn hummed through the void of space, carrying scholars and workers from a dozen different species. Princess stood at the observation window of her private quarters, watching distant stars blur past. She had spent 3 years convincing her father to allow this expedition. 3 years of arguments and promises and political maneuvering. Now, finally, she was headed toward the frontier worlds, toward the legendary death worlds that few of her people dared to study. Her advisor entered without knocking. The older woman carried a data pad and wore her usual expression of mild disapproval. "The crew manifest, Your Highness," said, handing over the device. "I've highlighted the key personnel you should acknowledge." Scrolled through the list. Scientists from the Collective, security officers from the Empire, engineers from the Methane worlds, the usual mix for a frontier expedition. Her eyes paused on one entry. "Human Maintenance Apprentice," she read aloud. "We have a human aboard." "Just one," said with a dismissive wave. "Low ranking. He's assigned to the Xenobiology lab for cleaning and basic repairs. Nothing to concern yourself with." Knew little about humans. There was quarantined and they rarely left their own system. The few she had read about seemed ordinary, not particularly strong like not especially intelligent like her own people. Just another species trying to find its place in the galaxy. She forgot about the human called almost immediately. The first week aboard Eternal Dawn passed quickly. Spent her days in the research library, studying reports from previous Death World expeditions. The evenings were filled with diplomatic dinners where she smiled and made conversation with the various department heads. She was good at this part, the performance of royalty. But what she truly wanted was to reach their destination, to finally see a death world with her own eyes. It was during her 3rd visit to the Xenobiology lab that she first encountered in person. The lab was a massive space filled with containment units, analysis equipment, and specimen tanks. Had come to review the collection of samples gathered from their route. She was examining a crystalline organism from the shattered belt when she noticed someone crouched beneath one of the storage units, tools spread around him. The man wore a plain gray uniform with no rank markings. His black hair was slightly messy, and he worked with quiet focus, completely unaware of her presence. When he finally slid out from under the unit, he nearly bumped into her feet. "Oh," he said, looking up, "sorry, didn't see you there." He stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. He was shorter than most species aboard the ship, but moved with an easy confidence. His eyes met hers without the usual deference she received from low-ranking crew members. "You are asked." "Maintenance," he said simply. "The cooling system for Tank 7 was malfunctioning, should be fixed now." "I see." Glanced at the tank in question, which held a small, tentacled creature from the marrow depths. "Thank you for your work." She meant it as a dismissal but didn't leave. Instead, he looked at the specimen she had been studying. "The crystal organism," he said. "Beautiful, isn't it? But you might want to keep the temperature lower. They go dormant in heat and you'll miss their most interesting behaviors." Felt a flash of irritation. Was this maintenance worker really offering her advice? "I'm quite familiar with proper specimen care," she said coolly. "Of course, Your Highness," nodded, gathering his tools. "Just a thought." After he left, found herself annoyed for the rest of the day. When told about the encounter, laughed. "Humans," she said. "They have no sense of proper hierarchy. I'm told it comes from their chaotic culture. Best to simply ignore him." Tried to do exactly that. 2 weeks later, the Eternal Dawn encountered something unexpected. The ship's sensors detected a debris field ahead, the scattered remains of what had once been a small colony. The captain ordered a salvage team to investigate, looking for survivors or clues about what had happened. Watched the preparation from the bridge. The salvage team consisted of 3 security officers, an engineer, and surprisingly, the human maintenance worker. Suited up with practiced ease, checking his gear with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. "Why is the maintenance apprentice going on a salvage mission?" asked the captain. "He volunteered, Your Highness," the captain replied, "and we need someone with good hands for delicate recovery work. Humans are supposed to be decent with fine motor control." The salvage team departed in a small shuttle, remained on the bridge, watching through the external cameras as they entered the debris field. The colony had been torn apart by something violent. Metal twisted at impossible angles. Structures cracked open like eggs. For 2 hours, the team searched through the wreckage. They found no survivors. What they did find was stranger than anyone expected. When the shuttle returned, carried a containment unit in his arms. Through the transparent walls, could see something moving inside. It looked like liquid shadow, flowing and reforming constantly. The officers who had accompanied him kept their distance, hands near their weapons. In the docking bay, the head of security was waiting. The massive warrior stood over 2 meters tall, his scaled skin reflecting the harsh lights. He stared at the containment unit with obvious unease. "What is that thing?" demanded. "Not sure yet," said calmly. "Found it in the colony's research wing. Looks like they were studying it before, whatever happened." "It's dangerous," stated. "I can feel it." "Maybe," agreed. He adjusted his grip on the container and noticed something odd. His hands were completely steady, no tremor of fear or nervousness. "But if we want to understand what destroyed the colony, we need to study it." "I don't like this," said, but he stepped aside. Carried the container toward the xenobiology lab. As he passed, who had come down to observe, he paused. "Your Highness, you might want to stay back from this one," he said quietly, "just in case." There was something in his voice, a note of authority that seemed wrong coming from a simple maintenance apprentice. Found herself stepping back without quite knowing why. In the lab, placed the container in an isolation unit and began setting up monitoring equipment. Watched from the doorway. The shadow thing inside the container moved in patterns that hurt to look at directly. It seemed to sense presence, pressing against the transparent walls nearest to him. Made a soft sound, almost like a hum. The shadow thing stopped moving for a moment, then retreated to the center of its container. "Fascinating," murmured, making notes on a data pad. Appeared beside, looking at the container with disgust. "That creature should be ejected into space," she said firmly. "It's clearly hostile." "Maybe," said without looking up. "Or maybe it's just scared. Hard to tell the difference sometimes." He continued his work, speaking softly to the creature as if it could understand him. And perhaps it could, because it grew calmer, its movements less erratic. Stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the human work. There was something peculiar about him, something that didn't quite fit the role of simple apprentice, but she couldn't identify what it was. Not yet. As she finally turned to leave, she heard speaking to the shadow thing again, his voice gentle and patient. Like someone calming a frightened animal. It made her wonder what kind of person developed that particular skill. And why a maintenance apprentice would need it at all. The Eternal Dawn dropped out of faster-than-light travel 3 weeks after the debris field incident. Through the viewports, 7 hung in space like a green and brown jewel. It was beautiful. It was also one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. Princess felt her pulse quicken as she looked at it. A real death world. Not images in a database or stories from other explorers. The actual thing waiting below. "Final equipment check in 1 hour," the captain announced over the ship's communication system. "All ground team members report to the prep bay." Was already wearing her exploration suit. She had requested it custom-made for this expedition, light but strong, with built-in sensors and a helmet that could withstand almost anything. Had argued against going down to the surface at all, but had been firm. She hadn't come this far to watch from orbit. In the prep bay, the ground team was assembling. 6 warriors led by, all heavily armed, 3 scientists from various species, 2 engineers, and to surprise the human maintenance worker, was checking over a collection of equipment cases, marking each one with careful attention. He wore a standard exploration suit, nothing special, but he moved in it like he had worn such suits 1,000 times before. "Why is he here?" asked quietly. The warrior glanced at and shrugged, his scaled shoulders rising and falling. Captain assigned him as equipment specialist, said we might need someone good with repairs in the field. His tone suggested he didn't think much of the decision. The shuttle ride to the surface was tense. Everyone knew the statistics. Death worlds had claimed more explorers than wars had claimed soldiers. The fauna alone could kill a dozen different ways. The atmosphere, the plant life, even the soil could be hostile. They landed in a clearing near a river, as far from obvious predator territory as the sensors could identify. The moment the shuttle door opened, sound rushed in. Had expected noise on a death world, but this was overwhelming. Calls and shrieks and buzzing sounds layered over each other in a constant symphony of life. "Stay in formation," ordered. "Weapons ready, don't touch anything." The team moved out, with the warriors forming a protective circle around the scientists. Immediately began taking readings, her instruments measuring everything from air quality to radiation levels. Every data point was precious. They had been exploring for less than an hour when the first attack came. The creatures erupted from the undergrowth without warning. They moved on 6 legs, each leg ending in claws that gleamed like metal. Their bodies were covered in segmented armor that clicked as they ran. There were 7 of them, moving with the coordination of a trained unit. "Defensive positions," roared. The warriors opened fire. Energy weapons lit up the clearing. 2 of the creatures fell immediately, but the others kept coming. Saw one leap at a warrior, its jaws opening to reveal teeth that could punch through steel. The formation held, but barely. These creatures were fast and smart, probing for weaknesses in the defense. One of them managed to get past a warrior and charged directly at. She froze, her mind going blank with terror. Then was there, stepping between her and the creature. He didn't have a weapon. He just stood there, making a series of clicking sounds with his tongue and moving his hands in sharp, specific gestures. The creature stopped so suddenly it skidded in the dirt. Its head tilted, confused, clicked again, louder this time, and stomped his foot twice. The creature took a step backward, then another. Then it turned and ran, disappearing into the jungle. The other surviving creatures followed. Silence fell over the clearing. Everyone stared at. "What did you do?" demanded, his weapon still raised. Lowered his hand slowly. "Territorial display," he said calmly, "similar to what males do when defending nesting sites. The clicking sound matches their own communication pattern. I convinced it we weren't worth fighting over." "How could you possibly know that?" one of the scientists asked, her voice shaking. "Lucky guess," said with a slight smile. But saw his eyes, and they weren't the eyes of someone who had guessed. They were the eyes of someone who had known exactly what to do. The expedition continued, but everyone was more nervous now. They took samples, made recordings, and mapped the immediate area. Every sound made them jump. Every shadow could be another attack. 2 hours later, disaster struck in a different form. A magnetic storm rolled in from the east, powerful enough to interfere with their equipment. Communicators stopped working. Sensors went dark. Even the shuttle's navigation system began glitching. "We need to head back," said. "Without sensors, we're blind." "The shuttle can't launch in this storm," the pilot reported over the still-functioning short-range radio. "Magnetic interference is too strong. You'll have to wait it out." Felt panic rising. Stranded on a death world without working sensors, they would be vulnerable to every predator in the area. However, was already kneeling beside the equipment cases. He opened several of them, pulling out components that seemed random. A coil of wire, A piece of shielding, some kind of crystal array. He worked quickly, his hands moving with absolute certainty. "What are you doing?" one of the engineers asked. "Building a makeshift sensor array," said, not looking up. "The magnetic storm operates on specific frequencies. If we can filter those out, we can get at least basic proximity sensors working again." "That's impossible with these materials," the engineer protested. Didn't answer. He just kept working. Within 20 minutes, he had assembled something that looked more like art than technology. Wires connected components at odd angles. The crystal sat at the center, held in place by what appeared to be part of a food container. He activated it. Immediately, a holographic display flickered to life, showing a rough map of their surroundings. It wasn't as detailed as their regular sensors, but it worked. "How?" the engineer breathed, staring at the device. "You pick up tricks when you work with equipment long enough," said, standing and brushing dirt from his knees. But was watching him carefully now. That hadn't been the work of an apprentice. That had been expert-level engineering, the kind that took years of training and field experience. She thought about the shadow creature on the ship, how it calmed it. She thought about the attacking creatures, how he had made them retreat with just sounds and gestures. Who was this human? That evening, back on the ship, accessed the database for information about humans. She expected to find detailed files. What she found instead was frustrating. Most of the information about Earth and its people was classified or heavily redacted. What little remained told her almost nothing useful. Earth, classification, Death World Class 12, status, quarantined, population, restricted information, technology level comparable to Galactic Standard, special notes, redacted. Class 12, felt a chill. She had never heard of a death world rated that high. 7, the planet they had just visited, was only Class 8. What kind of world was Class 12? And why was it quarantined? She searched for information about specifically. The file was minimal. Name, species, current assignment, nothing about his background, training, or how he came to be a maintenance apprentice on a diplomatic vessel. Sat in her quarters, staring at the incomplete data. Every instinct told her there was more to than he appeared to be, but without more information, she couldn't prove it. The next morning, she found in the xenobiology lab again, working on the shadow creature's containment unit. The creature seemed more active now, moving in complex patterns, was recording its movements, occasionally making soft sounds that caused it to change direction. "You're not really a maintenance apprentice, are you?" asked bluntly. Looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "My assignment papers say I am." "That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a moment, watching the shadow creature. "What we are and what others think we are aren't always the same thing, Your Highness," he finally said. "Sometimes it's easier to let people believe the simple story." "Why?" "Because the complicated truth makes people uncomfortable." He turned to face her fully. "I do my job. I don't cause trouble. Does it really matter what title is on my identification?" Wanted to press further, but something in his eyes stopped her. There was a hardness there, hidden beneath the calm exterior. A warning, perhaps, or maybe just weariness. "I suppose not," she said carefully. But as she left the lab, she knew she was lying. It did matter. Because something was coming, she could feel it. And when it arrived, she suspected the truth about would matter very much indeed. The second expedition to 7 began on a gray morning. The team had learned from their first visit, bringing better equipment and more protection. Princess felt more confident this time. They knew what to expect from the planet's dangers. She was wrong. They had been on the surface for 3 hours, moving through a dense forest region, when the sensors picked up something unusual. Large heat signatures moving in a coordinated pattern. Lots of them. Checked his display, and his face, usually so controlled, went pale. "Ravagers," he said quietly. The word sent a shock through the entire team. had read about Ravagers in the expedition reports. 6-meter-tall apex predators, armored scales stronger than military-grade plating, claws that could tear through solid metal, jaws powerful enough to crush bones to powder. They were the deadliest known species on 7, possibly in the entire sector. "How many?" one of the warriors asked, his voice shaking slightly. 15, said, staring at his scanner. "No, 17. They're surrounding us." "Retreat to the shuttle," the lead scientist ordered. "Now." The team turned and began moving quickly back the way they had come, but the Ravagers were faster. Within minutes, the massive creatures emerged from the tree line on all sides. They moved with terrible purpose, their massive bodies surprisingly quiet for their size. Got her first real look at a Ravager and felt her breath catch. It was enormous, standing on 4 legs as thick as tree trunks. Its head was all angles and teeth, with eyes that gleamed with frightening intelligence. The scales covering its body were a deep black that seemed to absorb light. When it moved, muscles rippled beneath that armored hide like cables of steel. "Defensive formation," shouted. "Prepare to engage." The warriors formed a circle, weapons raised. Everyone else huddled in the center. Knew, with absolute certainty, that they were going to die. The reports had been clear. No expedition had ever survived direct contact with a Ravager pack. The best they could hope for was to take a few of the creatures down before the end. The Ravagers began to close in, moving with the patience of predators that knew their prey had nowhere to run. The largest one, clearly the pack alpha, was at the front. It was even bigger than the others, covered in scars from countless battles. When it opened its jaws, the sound it made was like grinding metal mixed with thunder. "On my mark," said, his weapon aimed at the alpha's head. "Fire." "Wait." Everyone turned to look at. The human had been standing quietly in the circle, but now he stepped forward. "What are you doing?" demanded. "Making a terrible decision," said. He looked at directly. "I need everyone to stay completely still and absolutely silent. Can you do that?" "This is insane," said from somewhere behind. "We need to fight." "Fighting will get everyone killed," said calmly. "Staying silent might only get me killed. Better odds." Before anyone could stop him, walked toward the edge of the defensive circle. The warrior there moved aside, clearly too shocked to protest. Stood at the edge, facing the approaching Ravagers. Then he walked toward them. Wanted to scream at him to stop, but her voice wouldn't work. She could only watch as the human in his simple gray suit walked directly toward the Alpha Ravager. He didn't run, didn't draw a weapon, didn't show any sign of fear. He just walked with steady, measured steps. The Alpha Ravager paused, its massive head tilting slightly. This was probably not behavior it expected from prey. Kept walking until he was less than 5 meters from the creature. The Alpha could cover that distance in a single leap. It could kill with one swipe of its claws. The human had to know this, but he showed no fear. He stopped walking and stood perfectly still. Then, slowly, he raised his head and made direct eye contact with the Ravager. Knew enough about predator species to recognize what had just done. Direct eye contact was a challenge, a threat. It was telling the Ravager that he wasn't prey, that he was a rival predator. It was the most dangerous thing he could possibly do. The Alpha Ravager's eyes narrowed. It took a step forward, bringing its massive head down to level. It opened its jaws, showing teeth as long as forearm. The smell of its breath, even from a distance, was overwhelming. A mixture of blood and decay and something else, something that triggered every instinct to run and hide. Didn't move. He kept eye contact, his body language completely relaxed. Then he made a sound from deep in his chest. It was low and rumbling, almost below the range of hearing. It vibrated through the air, making bones ache. The Ravager froze. Its eyes widened slightly. Made the sound again, longer this time. Then, moving very slowly, he raised one hand, palm out, non-threatening but not submissive either. He held it there, steady as stone. The Ravager stared at his hand, at his face. Its jaws were still open, still close enough to bite in half. Then very slowly moved his hand forward, closer to those terrible jaws, closer to the teeth and the death they promised. His movement was calm, deliberate, like he was reaching out to touch something precious and fragile, not a killing machine. His hand made contact with the Ravager's snout, just above the nostrils. The creature's scales were rough under his palm. For a long moment, nothing happened. The world seemed to hold its breath. His heart was beating so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Then the Ravager did something had never seen in any report, any recording, any story. It lowered its head, broke eye contact, took a small step backward. It had submitted. The Alpha's movement rippled through the pack. One by one, the other Ravagers lowered their heads, stepped back. The challenge was over, and somehow, impossibly, the human had won without fighting. Stood there for a few more seconds, his hand still on the Alpha's snout. He spoke softly, words too quiet for to hear. The Alpha rumbled in response, a sound almost like purring but deeper. Then slowly, carefully, his hand and took a step backward. The Ravagers watched him. The Alpha watched him longest. Then, as if some silent signal had been given, they turned and began melting back into the forest. Within minutes they were gone, leaving only trampled ground as evidence they had been there at all. Stood alone for a moment, his back to the team. His shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. Then he turned and walked back to the defensive circle. The fierce warrior who had seen face-down enemies without flinching was sitting on the ground. His legs had simply given out. He stared up with an expression of pure terror. "What are you?" he whispered. Looked down at him. For a moment his face showed something had never seen before: exhaustion, sadness, the weight of carrying a secret too heavy to bear alone. "I think," said quietly, "that conversation is overdue." Found her voice finally. "Yes," she said, "I think it is." The walk back to the shuttle was silent. No one spoke. No one could quite process what they had witnessed. Several times looked at, trying to reconcile what she had seen with the quiet maintenance worker she thought she knew. On the shuttle, during the ride back to the eternal dawn, spoke again. "I have fought in 3 wars," he said, his voice hollow. "I have faced enemies that would make most species flee in terror, but I have never in my entire life been as frightened as I was watching you walk toward that Ravager." He paused. "What is Earth like? What kind of world creates someone who can do what you just did?" Looked out the viewport at the planet below. "A hard world," he said simply. "A world that doesn't forgive mistakes." "And humans survived it," said. "It wasn't a question." "We did more than survive," said. "We thrived." Back on the ship, the captain called an emergency meeting. Senior staff only, but Princess insisted on attending. Stood at the front of the conference room, looking uncomfortable with all the attention. "I think," the captain said carefully, "that you owe us an explanation." Nodded slowly. "My name is," he began, "but I'm not a maintenance apprentice. I'm a Earth's leading specialist in death world ecosystems and predator behavior." He paused. "I have 3 doctorate degrees and 20 years of field experience. I've worked on 14 different death worlds. Humanity sent me on this expedition because they wanted their best representative, not their." The room was absolutely silent. "Why lie?" asked. "Because," said, meeting her eyes, "humanity has a reputation problem. When people hear human from Earth, they get nervous. When they hear expert death world specialist from a Class 12 planet, they get terrified. I wanted to earn your trust through my actions, not frighten you with my credentials." "Class 12, the captain repeated. "I've never heard of a death world rated above Class 10. "Earth is special," said quietly, "in the worst possible way." He began to explain, and as he spoke, felt her understanding of everything shift and reshape itself into something new and terrifying. The conference room had never felt so small. Princess sat at the table, surrounded by senior officers and scientists, all of them staring at like he was a puzzle they couldn't solve. The human stood at the front, his hands clasped behind his back, looking more tired than had ever seen him. Earth is rated Class 12, repeated. To understand what that means, you need to understand how Death World classifications work. A Class 1 world has some dangerous elements but is mostly survivable. Class 5 might have hostile weather or a few aggressive species. Class 8, like 7, has multiple apex predators, toxic environments, and requires significant preparation to visit safely. He pulled up a holographic display showing Earth from orbit. It looked beautiful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, peaceful. Earth has everything, said quietly. Megafauna predators that could swallow you whole. Microscopic organisms that can kill you in hours. Plants that are poisonous to touch. Weather systems that can flatten cities. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, droughts, floods, and gravity 30% higher than galactic standard. Many death worlds have such features, said, though her voice was less confident than usual. Yes, agreed. But Earth had one more thing, the worst thing, it had other humans. He changed the display, showing images of ancient human history. Battles, wars, empires rising and falling. Humans didn't just compete with the predators, explained. We competed with each other. We formed groups and fought other groups. We developed weapons, strategies, tactics. We learned to be clever because the human in the next valley might be smarter than the lion in the cave. Earth didn't just create physical predators. It created thinking predators, us. Leaned forward. You're saying humans evolved as predators. Apex predators, corrected. Humans are persistence hunters. Do you know what that means? He looked around the room. No one answered. It means we chase our prey until it collapses from exhaustion. A human can run for hours, days, even at a steady pace. Most prey animals sprint fast but tire quickly. We just keep coming, keep following, keep hunting. We don't give up. He showed another image, this one of early humans tracking an animal across vast plains. Humans developed the ability to track almost anything. We read footprints, broken branches, disturbed soil. We learned to predict where prey would go, what it would do. We studied every predator on our world until we understood them better than they understood themselves. And then we killed them. Killed them? One of the scientists asked. Made them extinct, said bluntly. Earth used to have predators much larger than ravagers, giant cats with teeth like knives, bears that stood 4 meters tall, reptiles that ruled the land for millions of years. Humans killed them all, not because we had to, because we could. The room was silent, felt something cold settle in her stomach. But humans aren't violent by nature, the captain protested. Your species has been peaceful since joining the galactic community. We're not violent by nature, agreed. We're survivors by nature. Violence is just a tool. We use it when needed. But we learned something important on Earth, something that took thousands of years and countless mistakes. We learned that understanding is more powerful than violence. He gestured to the image of the Ravager encounter. What I did on the surface wasn't magic. It was knowledge. Ravagers, like most predators, follow rules. They have social structures, communication methods, body language. They test rivals before fighting because fighting is dangerous even for the winner. What I did was speak their language. Show them I understood the rules. Prove I was a predator like them, not prey. How did you learn their language? Asked. We've been studying Ravagers for decades and never managed it. Met her eyes. Because you were studying them as scientists. I studied them as a predator. I thought like them. What would I do if I was defending territory? How would I test a rival? What signals would I use to avoid unnecessary violence? These aren't scientific questions. They're instinctive ones. And humans have those instincts, said slowly. Yes, buried deep, but yes. Turned off the display. Earth taught humans to read predators, to understand them, to think like them. It's how we survived. And that knowledge, that instinct, it doesn't go away just because we move to space stations and peaceful societies. Stood up abruptly. "This is why Earth is quarantined," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "The galaxy is afraid of you." "Yes," said simply, "and they have good reason to be. A species that evolved on a Class 12 death world, that became apex predators by outthinking everything else, that has instincts for hunting and warfare burned into their genetics. That's terrifying, especially to species that evolved on gentler worlds." "Are we right to be afraid?" the captain asked. Was quiet for a long moment. "That depends," he finally said. "Are you afraid of a knife? A knife can kill, but it can also save lives in the hands of a surgeon. Humans have the capacity for great violence, but we also have the capacity for great kindness, for understanding, for choosing peace even when violence would be easier." He looked around the room. "I didn't hurt the Ravagers. I could have. I had weapons. I had knowledge of their weak points, but I chose to communicate instead. That's the human choice. Not the only choice we can make, but the one we prefer." Found herself thinking about all the interactions she'd had with, the way he calmed the shadow creature, the way he spoke to the attacking pack hunters, even the way he had fixed equipment and offered advice. Always gentle, always patient, never using force when understanding would work. "Why hide who you are?" she asked. "Why pretend to be an apprentice?" "Because my credentials scare people," said. "Doctor, Death World Specialist from Earth. People hear that and they see a monster. They don't give me a chance to show them who I really am. But the maintenance worker, he's harmless, forgettable. People treat him normally. They let him prove his worth through actions, not titles." "It's dishonest," said. "It's survival," countered. "Just a different kind. Humans learn that sometimes the best way to succeed isn't to dominate, it's to fit in, to be underestimated, to let others feel superior while you quietly do the work." "That's manipulative," insisted. "That's human," said with a slight smile. "We're very good at social manipulation. Had to be, living in groups on a death world. Reading people, understanding what they need, giving them what they expect while pursuing our own goals. It's not malicious. It's just how we operate." Laughed suddenly, a sharp bark of sound. "We had the galaxy's most dangerous predator aboard our ship and treated him like a janitor." "I am a janitor," said. "I clean labs, fix equipment, do basic maintenance. Just because I can also face down Ravagers doesn't mean I can't take out the trash." "But which one is the real you?" asked. Looked at her for a long moment. "Both," he said. "I'm a scientist who spent years studying the deadliest creatures in the galaxy. I'm also someone who doesn't mind getting his hands dirty with simple work. Humans are complicated. We contain multitudes, as one of our poets said. We can be gentle and fierce, peaceful and dangerous, humble and proud, all at the same time." The captain stood up. "This changes things," he said. "The crew needs to know the truth about you. They need to understand what they're working with." "I understand," said. "I knew this would happen eventually. I just hoped to delay it a bit longer." "Why?" asked. "Because now everything changes," said sadly. "Now when I walk into a room, people will remember what I did to the Ravagers. They'll remember I'm from Earth. They'll treat me differently, and I'll lose what I had, the chance to just be." Felt a pang of sympathy. She understood in a way. She was a princess and people never forgot it. They never saw past her title to the person underneath. Had managed for a brief time to escape his own title, and now that escape was ending. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I think you're brave, not for facing the Ravagers, for choosing to hide your strength in order to build real connections with people." Smiled at her, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you, Your Highness. That means more than you know." The meeting ended, but thoughts continued long into the night. She lay in her quarters, thinking about Earth and humans and what it meant to be an apex predator trying to live peacefully. She thought about words. That understanding was more powerful than violence. That choice mattered more than capability. And she thought about the Ravagers, backing down before a human who had shown them respect and understanding instead of fear. Maybe, she thought, humanity wasn't something to fear. Maybe they were something to learn from. The next morning, word had spread through the ship. Everyone knew the truth about Now. Watched how people reacted when he entered the dining hall. They moved aside, whispered, stared. Got his food and sat alone at a table in the corner, the same table he had always used. But now the isolation wasn't by choice. It was by fear. Made a decision. She picked up her tray and walked across the dining hall. Every eye followed her. She sat down across from. "May I join you?" she asked. Looked surprised, then grateful. "Of course, Your Highness." "Just," she said, "I think we're past formalities." They ate in companionable silence, and slowly, one by one, others began to join them. First, the big warrior sitting down with a nod, then some of the scientists, even though she looked uncomfortable. Because if the princess wasn't afraid, maybe there was no reason to be afraid. And the apex predator from Earth smiled quietly into his food and said nothing. The expedition to Seven continued, but everything had changed. The warriors who once barely acknowledged now deferred to his judgment on any potential threat. Scientists asked his opinion before making decisions. Even the captain consulted him on route planning through dangerous areas. Handled it all with the same quiet competence he had shown as a maintenance worker. But Princess could see the weight of it wearing on him. He had lost his anonymity, his chance to just be another crew member. Now he was the human from Earth, the Death World expert, the man who made Ravagers back down. Found herself seeking him out more often, partly from curiosity and partly from a desire to understand. They would sit in the observation lounge after the day's work, looking out at the stars, talking about death worlds and life and everything in between. "Do you miss Earth?" she asked one evening. Considered the question. "Sometimes," he said. "I miss the challenge of it. Space stations are safe. Ships are controlled environments. Earth was unpredictable. Every day was a test of survival. It made you feel alive in a way that's hard to describe." "But you left." "Because humans need more than survival," said. "We need purpose, connection, growth. Earth gave us strength, but the galaxy can give us meaning." He smiled slightly. "If the galaxy will let us in. After what you did with the Ravagers, I think they'll have to reconsider," said. "Maybe, or maybe they'll just be more afraid." 3 weeks later, the expedition made an unexpected discovery. Deep in Seven's northern continent, they found ruins. Not natural formations, but actual structures built by intelligent beings. The team rushed to investigate, excited by the implications. The ruins were old, thousands of years at least. Stone buildings covered in strange symbols. The team set up a research camp, and scientists from every department began studying the site. On the third day of investigation, they discovered why the settlement had been abandoned. The ruins sat directly on top of a massive underground nest. The creatures that lived there were gentle enough when left alone, but the ancient builders had unknowingly placed their homes right where the creatures came to lay eggs. The attacks recorded in the ruins' final writings said, reading the translated symbols, weren't hostility. They were parents defending their young. The builders thought they were being hunted. In reality, they were just in the way. He stood in the center of the ruins, looking thoughtful. This happens more often than you'd think. Species come to death worlds, see the aggressive fauna, and assume it's all mindless violence. But usually there's a reason. Territory, protection, resources. If you understand the reason, you can avoid the conflict. So the ancient civilization here died because they didn't understand the local wildlife. One of the scientists asked. "Probably," said. "Understanding death worlds isn't about being stronger than the predators. It's about being smarter, knowing when to fight, when to flee, and when to simply not build your city on someone else's nursery." The team moved their research camp to a safer location, and the attacks from the underground creatures stopped immediately. Word of this success spread through the expedition. Approach, his philosophy of understanding over domination, was proving itself again and again. Found herself learning from him, seeing Death World ecosystems through his eyes. He taught her to look for patterns in animal behavior, to read territorial markers, to distinguish between real threats and creatures just trying to live their lives. "You would have made a good scholar," she told him one day as they examined some native plants. "I don't think your people would accept me," said with a laugh. "Maybe not before," admitted, "but I'm going to recommend that they do. When we return, I'll submit a full report. You should be recognized as the leading expert in Death World ecology. Your methods should be taught." "That's generous of you," said, "but are you sure? Endorsing a human could be politically difficult." Thought about that. Her father, the emperor, would certainly have opinions. The court would gossip. Other species might see it as showing favoritism to a potentially dangerous people. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm sure. You've proven your worth. More importantly, you've proven that humans can be trusted, that your strength comes with wisdom and restraint." Over the following weeks, his influence on the expedition became undeniable. Under his guidance, they made discoveries that had eluded previous missions. They successfully tagged and tracked 3 different apex predator species. They identified safe zones for future research stations. They even established communication protocols with a semi-intelligent species of pack hunters. All without firing a single weapon. The warrior who had been terrified of became one of his closest allies. The two would spend hours discussing predator behavior, sharing stories from their respective worlds. It turned out, while strong, had their own experiences with dangerous wildlife. "On my," said one evening, "we have the dusk stalkers, 3-meter-tall predators nearly invisible in low light. When I was young, I lost my brother to one." "I'm sorry," said quietly. "I hunted it for 2 years," continued. "Finally tracked it to its den. I was ready to kill it. But when I got there, I found it dying from some sickness. It looked at me with these eyes, and I realized it was just an animal, just trying to survive like my brother was, like I was." He paused. "I walked away." "That took strength," said. "You would have done the same." "Maybe. Humans like to think we're beyond revenge, but we're not always. We just try to be." The expedition was nearing its end when they received a distress call from another ship. A cargo vessel had made an emergency landing on 7 after experiencing engine failure. They were stranded in one of the most dangerous regions of the planet, surrounded by hostile fauna. The Eternal Dawn immediately changed course, helped plan the rescue mission, using his knowledge of the region to identify the safest approach route. The rescue team, led by and accompanied by, descended to the surface. The cargo ship had landed in a narrow valley filled with territorial predators. The crew, unfamiliar with death worlds, had made the situation worse by firing weapons at everything that moved. Now they were trapped inside their damaged ship, surrounded by angry creatures. "They've turned the whole valley against them," observed, scanning the area. "Every predator within kilometers thinks this is an invasion." "Can we fight our way through?" asked. "We could," said, "but we'd lose people and so would they. Better way is to calm the situation down." He spent the next hour doing exactly that, moving slowly through the valley, using sounds and gestures and movements to communicate with the predators, showing them that the rescue team wasn't a threat. Gradually, carefully, creating a safe corridor from the landing zone to the cargo ship. It was exhausting work. Several times predators challenged him and he had to stand his ground, maintaining eye contact until they backed down. But eventually, a path opened. The cargo crew was evacuated safely. Not a single shot fired, not a single casualty on either side. On the trip back to the Eternal Dawn, the cargo ship's captain sat next to in the shuttle. "I've heard about humans," the captain said. He was a methane breather, his voice filtered through a translator. "They say you're dangerous." "We can be," admitted. "They also say you're from a world of nightmares. Earth has its challenges." The captain was quiet for a moment. "Thank you," he said finally, "for not being what they say, for being better." Smiled tiredly, "We're trying." The expedition ended 2 weeks later. The Eternal Dawn began its journey back to civilized space, its holds full of data and specimens, and knowledge that would keep scientists busy for years. On the last night before they reached the first outpost station, organized a formal ceremony. The entire crew gathered in the main assembly hall. She stood at the front, wearing her formal royal attire, every bit the princess she was born to be. "This expedition has been more successful than anyone could have predicted," she began. "We have made discoveries that will advance our understanding of Death World ecosystems by decades. We have proven that these dangerous environments can be studied safely with the right approach and the right expertise." She paused, looking directly at, who stood in the crowd looking uncomfortable with the attention. "Much of this success is due to one person, a person I initially dismissed as a simple maintenance apprentice. A person who taught me, taught all of us, that true strength comes not from domination but from understanding." She gestured for to join her at the front. He walked forward reluctantly, and she could see the anxiety in his eyes. He didn't like being the center of attention. "Doctor," said formally, "on behalf of the Empire and this expedition, I recognize you as the foremost expert in Death World ecology. Your methods, your knowledge, and your philosophy will be recommended for adoption across all future Death World missions." Applause filled the hall. Genuine, warm applause. Not the fearful respect from weeks ago, but real appreciation. "Additionally," continued, "I will personally recommend to the Galactic Council that Earth's quarantine status be reconsidered. Humanity has proven they can be trusted. More than that, they have proven they have knowledge the galaxy desperately needs." More applause. Looked overwhelmed. When the noise died down, he spoke quietly. "Thank you, Your Highness, but I have to correct something. I'm not the foremost expert. I'm just one human who loves studying dangerous creatures. Earth has hundreds like me, thousands maybe, people who understand Death Worlds because we come from one. If the galaxy wants our knowledge, we're ready to share it. We've been ready for a long time. We were just waiting for someone to ask." Smiled. "Then I'm asking, on behalf of the Empire and I hope the wider galactic community, will you help us?" "Yes," said simply, "we will." That night after the ceremony, found in the observation lounge. He was packing his few belongings into a small bag, preparing for their arrival at the station. "Will you keep the gray uniform?" she asked, gesturing to the maintenance apprentice clothing folded neatly on a chair. Picked it up, running his fingers over the simple fabric. "I think I will," he said. "It reminds me that titles don't matter as much as actions. That sometimes the best way to help is to work quietly, without recognition." "The galaxy knows who you are now," said. "You can't go back to being anonymous." "No," agreed. "But I can remember what it taught me. That being underestimated isn't always bad. That people reveal more of themselves when they think you're not important. That pride can blind you to truth." He folded the uniform and placed it carefully in his bag. "Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I might need it again someday. Never know when pretending to be an apprentice might come in handy." Laughed, then more seriously she said, "I'm sorry for how I treated you at first." "You have nothing to apologize for," said. "You saw what I wanted you to see. The mistake was mine, not yours." "No," said firmly. "The mistake was mine. I judged based on appearance and assumptions. I should have looked deeper sooner. You taught me that lesson and I won't forget it." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars stream past. Tomorrow they would dock at the station, would continue to make her report, would return to Earth, carrying news that humanity's integration into galactic society had taken a major step forward. But for now, in this moment, they were just two people who had learned to see past surfaces to the truth beneath. One a princess who had discovered that strength came in unexpected forms. One a human who had proven that his species could be both powerful and wise. As the ship hummed through the darkness of space, received a message on his personal communicator. It was from Earth, from the Department of Galactic Affairs. "Congratulations on successful integration mission," it read. "New assignment attached. Class 11 Death World Unexplored, Designation 3. Mission duration 1 year. Will you accept?" Looked at the message for a long time. Then he typed his response. "Accepted, but on one condition. I get to wear whatever uniform I want." The reply came back almost immediately. "Granted, and we're proud of you. Earth is proud. You showed them what we really are." Smiled and looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy full of dangerous worlds and wonderful mysteries. "No," he said quietly to himself. "I showed them what we're trying to be. That's even better." And somewhere in the darkness of space, on a ship full of people who had learned to look beyond fear to understanding, the future felt a little brighter than before.